the appointed time, this is a call to order of the New Bern Historic Preservation Commission. Could we have a roll call, sir?
Peggy Broadway.
Here.
Tripp Muir.
Here.
Ruth Cox.
Present.
Kristen Evans.
Here.
Ellen Sheridan.
Here.
Joseph Klotz.
Here.
James O. Woods.
Here.
Jr. George Gregg.
Here.
James Bisbee.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Everyone's here.
Call for a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. So I'm going to read an introduction to start with the hearings. The Historic Preservation Commission is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It is responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's locally designated historic districts, downtown and Riverside, based on U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinances, and New Bern's historic guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include approving applications for a certificate of appropriateness and preventing demolition of historic structures due to neglect. The HPC holds a quasi-judicial hearing on an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The Commission hears sworn testimony and evidence provided by the applicant, by parties who receive notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The Commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to specific historic guidelines. Likewise, commissioners shall refrain from stating personal opinions, personal likes or dislikes, or hearsay during a hearing. A commission's decision on an application is based solely on testimony and evidence presented at a hearing that directly relates to the historic guidelines. So could we have the swearing in of any persons who want to give information this evening?
Yes, certainly. Okay, anyone who will be speaking this evening for or against any of the applications need to be sworn in. Come on up front, please. Oh, right, I guess, keep 6 feet apart, I guess. There you go. Okay, so raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your ability?
I do.
Okay, then please sign in here one at a time.
Having all the presenters signed in and sworn in, I will go over a general conduct process for this hearing. The HPC administrator provides an overview of the application. The applicant or representative presents the application. Proponents and opponents who receive notice of the hearing can present evidence. Rebuttal is allowed by the applicant and by proponents and opponents who receive notice. Others who can justify that they have relevant information and will be directly affected can present evidence. The HPC administrator presents the staff's findings and recommendations. The applicant or representative has an opportunity to make final comments on their application. Commissioners discuss the evidence and may ask for clarification from the applicants or presenters. The chairman calls for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. The motion is discussed by the commission. The chairman calls for a vote on the motion by the commission. A COA can be approved, approved with conditions, or denied. So, sir, can we go to the first applicant, which is 419 Metcalf Street? And my understanding is that they are not going to be here tonight to present this?
That is correct.
So can we have, do we need a motion to continue that then? Did you say yes?
That is what they've requested as a continuance.
No, they continue. So can I have a motion to continue this application?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? None. So the motion passed. So let us go to 201 Eden Street.
Okay, just so anyone in the audience, if you're waiting or we're here for 419 Metcalf, that will be at our next meeting a month from now. Did the motion actually state the date and time and place
Of the
of the continuance?
no, it did not.
Can I ask you to redo that, please?
Okay, and so the continuance is going to be a month from now,
July 15th.
so July 15th. So do I need another motion?
Yes.
Okay, could I have another motion
Move
that,
that the application for 419 Metcalf be postponed till the meeting on July 19th.
Continue.
Continued.
15th,
Continued.
July 15th?
July 15th, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
5:30 p.m.
5:30 p.m.
here at City Hall.
here at City Hall.
Thank you.
You got it.
You do.
We now have all the parts. Everybody who is in favor of this, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, it now passed with all the parts it's supposed to have.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, now we can go to 201 Eden Street.
So, this is the application for 201 Eden Street. This is a project which is a new sanitary sewer pump station to replace an existing station on, the existing station is on the riverfront, across South Front Street. And now will be moved to the location on the property on Eden Street, which is a corner of Eden and South Front. You'll see all this in a minute. This is your application signed. This is a project by the city. It is on state property with either, I'm not sure if they achieved an agreement for an easement, but the plan is to have, at least the plan is to have an easement on the property for this project. So this is a overall plan of the site, or most of the site. For the project, the rest of the property actually extends off to the right-hand side of the page and off the page. I can make this a little smaller. So, there we go. The blue lines represent the property line. And so off on the right-hand side then is Eden Street. And so the property has frontage on Eden, but this project will be primarily on South Front Street. In design review, I mentioned that the location of the pump station was pretty much in alignment with a previous curb cut. They've now moved the project to the east here because in order to create room for, you'll see a large landscape buffer along this side of the property. So everything has shifted, say, 10 feet to the east. All right, so let's go down. It's not pump station. I think that's just sewer section information there. And let's go. There we go. This just shows the existing pump station along the river, and then up here is the site. So it's a bit of an engineering drawing. All right. So then we have the elevations. Come on, sorry. The elevations of the pump station hasn't changed since design review. And here as well, the plan on the right and the front of the pump station on the left. You'll see the base is brick, faced in brick. It's really concrete block foundation with brick facing. And then the siding is hardy board siding. You can see some dental detail work along the corner to the eave or soffit. And then the roofing is architectural shingles, and you can see they have a small cupola on the top. Also, say an entryway light. The railing is metal, wrought iron metal railing. They subsequently added another drawing which pretty much just explains the foundation structure. It's the concrete block and brick is this foundation, and then it's filled with soil, compacted soil, and then a concrete slab on the top. And then we end with that. So this now is the basically the landscaping plan, showing on the left the 10-foot wide landscaping buffer that's required for this kind of use per our zoning ordinance. And then they have their own 10-foot clearance requirement for access around the building as well. The two large circles here are actually the wells, or the well pits, I think they call them. And those have equipment inside, but are essentially flush with the surface of the ground. So they're not a structure that sticks out of the ground. This hammerhead shape here is the small parking and turning area for one or two vehicles to get in and out of the facility. Oh, and you can see there's considerable amount of landscaping along the east side as well, and the north side, basically filling out all the way around the project. And this is the landscaping list of planting list, sorry. They have some landscaping details here as well. Oh, and showing for the planting edge, there's no artificial edging. It's just a soil slanted earth edge. And this is a photo of the project site. So essentially, on the left is the first curb cut, the right is the second, neither of which they'll be using. The actual building will be straight back from this space in between those two, and then a new curb cut is added on the right here. So several of these smaller trees will be removed in order to accomplish the project. But the rest of the trees on the site will remain. Out front, there's some, and along the back here. And then this is a shot of the site from Eden Street, and the project is in the back of this, back behind this telephone pole here. It's back behind there, and behind one, I think the front tree stays, and maybe the other one does too. But, and here we have our zoning and inspections report. Too small to read. And it meets the requirements of the zoning and will not require, it will require a building permit. And then our recommendations are available when you're ready.
Okay, are there any conflicts of interest among the members of the commission? Are there any issues about the application's completeness by anyone? Hearing none. Does the applicant or the representative wish to make any additional comments at this time?
Only if you're just. You need to come up to the microphone, please. Did we swear you in? Yes, thank you.
Dr. Cox, just here to answer any additional questions the commission may have regarding the project.
Okay, we'll just stand right there. We might have some eventually. Okay, are there any notified proponents of this in the audience? Seeing none. Are there any notified opponents? Seeing none. So there will be no rebuttals from any of that. Are there any comments from anyone with relevant evidence and has standing in the audience? Seeing none, we will move along. So, sir, if you could give us the findings of the staff and the recommendations.
Certainly. So this is the application of the city of New Bern. Mr. Hughes, the city engineer, is representing them. And the project is to include construction of a new pump station at the rear and side of a vacant lot. So the vacant lot has no historic property name nor any inventory description. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Development pattern, 2.1.1. Public and open spaces, 2.2.2. Landscaping, 2.4.3 and 2.4.4. Infill construction, 3.4.1, 3.4.2, 3.4.3, and 3.4.4. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is not a primary building and is located on a vacant lot. 2, the project is located in the flood hazard area and is required to be built to the required flood elevation. 3, the proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 4, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed the project and commented accordingly. And 5, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So the staff recommends the commission approve this application to include construction of a new pump station at the rear and side of the vacant lot, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you. Do we have any evidence or testimony from any city, state, or government body out in the audience? Seeing none. Sir, do you have any final comments you'd like to make?
I will note a few things that have changed just since the design review meeting a couple of weeks ago. I think Matt covered a few of those. We did shift the structure a little further to the east to accommodate a larger screen between the subject property and the housing authority property. We also added screens to the north and to the east based on some recommendations from the State of North Carolina Property Office. And in doing so, we've shifted the project down, and I think Matt mentioned that, where it doesn't line up, the driveways don't line up with curb cuts. There's about 30 or 40 foot of curb and a good portion of street that will come out as part of the sewer rehab work that's actually going to occur in the street in conjunction with this project. So we'll be replacing the curb cuts and the curb and gutter through there, so everything will line up and work with the new driveway we're done.
You're gonna do that when you do all this street stuff?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The excavation for the pump station site will be about 16 foot down. Will be 16 foot down. We'll probably have a 10 by 10 hole, every bit of that deep. That'll work its way into the street as we tie it to existing infrastructure. So during construction, that whole area will be a very large excavation site. And as we bring that back up to grade, rebuild the street, rebuild the curb and gutter, sidewalk, everything will have to kind of be put back as part of that.
Okay. All right. Discussion among the commissioners. Any questions, comments?
I just have one question,
Okay.
please, Madam Chair. Mr. Hughes, what is the elevation of the station?
The finished slab, I think, it's either 9 or 11 feet. I think it's 9 feet is the slab, the concrete slab. We have all the equipment up at a minimum of 11 feet, which is the new base flood, plus the freeboard.
Thank you.
Jordan, are you taking out the old pump station?
We are, so it doesn't really show on the plans, but part of this project, it's a very large project, as part of it, we will be completely decommissioning the existing sanitary sewer pump station that's right on the bank of Lawson Creek, directly across Front Street from this project. We'll be demoing that one down about 5 feet in the ground, crushing, filling everything, coming back up with the fill and topsoil, sodded over. So we just have a nice green space area there, be able to repurpose some of that area, get a little more park amenity to it than what it currently is.
Matt mentioned something that was down below ground. Is that equipment?
Yes, ma'am. The bulk of the structure is actually below grade. So we have a wet well structure. It's 10 foot diameter, 16 feet deep. That's where the actual sewer pumps reside, is in that structure below grade. We also have a valve vault structure that contains the check valve assemblies for the pump station that's in another below grade structure. So all you'll see if you walk down the street will be a couple of access hatches flush with the ground. You open them up and there's these big holes in the ground where all the equipment's at. So really the only thing the structure above grade that we're building contains is the control panel that actually has the electric controls that tell the pumps when to cut on, when to cut off. The telemetry equipment that notifies if there's a problem with any of the pumping equipment, as well as the auxiliary generator that would run the station in a power outage event. So it's a lot going on the site, and most of it, when we're done, will be below grade. You'll never see it other than the little access hatches at the surface.
And does that equipment need to be serviced?
Yes, ma'am. We have crews that go by daily and monitor these stations, check these stations. We have the capability to pull those pumps. They're on a rail and guide system where they can be lifted out of the station for maintenance on the pumps and lowered back in. We do that with a boom truck.
Yeah. One other question. The trees that you're going to remove, will you be replacing them?
We've got a bunch of trees, and it's hard to make out there. The landscape plan got a little busy. We did modify the temporary construction easement, essentially the construction area, a little bit to try to preserve as many of the larger caliper trees. I'd say anything 8 or 10 inches and up. There's a lot of smaller caliper trees, not sure when they were planted, but they're not that old, that will come out. Looks like a few pecans. There's a couple of pine trees. A couple of them, there's actually dying or dead pine trees that are going to come out as part of this. But we do have trees going back to replace the ones that came out, that will be incorporated into the screens on the east, north, and west side of the project.
And I will say that your building goes very nicely with Trines Palace, which is right across the street there. So it looks like some of the buildings in there. So I appreciate you taking the detail and time to do that. So maybe it looks like it belongs to Trines Palace.
At the end of the day, I'm hoping that we'll have a structure that will accomplish our goal and our need of getting some of that sewer equipment off of the riverbank, being able to continue to provide reliable sewer service to the community, at the same time not creating something that sticks out like a sore thumb down there.
That's a good thing not to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So any other questions, comments? So I call for a motion to approve the COA.
Madam Chair, I move that we find the application for certificate of appropriateness for 201 Eden Street to be in non-congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance Section 15.4.11 through 15.4.29, and New Bern's Historical District guidelines, based on the following specific guidelines and findings of facts. Guidelines: developmental patterns 2.1.1, public and open spaces 2.2.2, landscaping 2.4.3, 2.4.4, infill construction 3.4.1 through 3.4.4. Findings of fact: the project is not a primary building and is located on a vacant lot. 2, the project is located in a flood hazard area and is required to be built to the required flood elevation. 3, that the proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 4, that the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commentated accordingly. 5, and that the project is not in congruence with the guidelines.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, so let's have a vote. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? None, so the motion passed. Can we have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, the COA is approved. So can we go to 520 New Street?
Okay, 520 New Street. Here we have the application on the screen. And this is a project which is a landscape plan for a residence in the historic residence in the historic district. And you see the application is signed and dated. They're representing themselves, and they provided quite a lot of description of their project, including, usually we ask planting materials, list of planting materials. And next is a site plan, landscape plan. It's a little smaller so you see the extent of it first. And this shows the front of the house is at the bottom. Metcalf Street is on the side, and then the neighbors along Metcalf Street are along the top edge. So it's basically this left and back side of the residence. And we discussed this at the design review meeting, and I believe there have been no changes since then, although the applicants may decide to amend it in a minute. And these are some of the same photographs, or these are the same photographs that we also saw at design review, giving us a tour into the property and the area to be landscaped. There, a view of the back of the house, and another view of the back of the house from a different angle. And then back towards the gate and street, Metcalf Street. And again, the gate and the parking is to the left of the gate, and then so the bottom right photograph shows an image towards the side of the house, which also shows up here. The rest of the side of the house, and there's you can see in the background of the upper left photo is the fence along the front of the house, or across the front, the back of the front yard of the house, I guess that's how you might say that. This image on the right is the fence along Metcalf. And then outside the fence along Metcalf, that's what that looks like. So we have our zoning and inspections report here. And it meets the land use ordinance and will not require a building permit. And then we have our recommendations.
Okay. Are there any conflicts of interest? from the commissioners? Seeing none. Are there anyone who has any issues on application completeness? Seeing none. Would the applicant or their representative like to say anything else?
I don't think there's anything else, but I'll
So if you
make
will come
myself
up-
available for
come up.
questions.
Come up to the microphone.
Okay, you have to say it again because,
I'll make myself available if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you.
also, just announce who you are.
My name is Barbara Borneman. I'm one of the applicants. My husband is here, Perry Posmajan, and he is another applicant.
Okay, thank you. So, is there any testimony from any notified proponents? Seeing none. Any testimony from any opponents? Seeing none. So there'll be no rebuttal. Is there anyone who has relevant evidence and has standing that would like to speak? Seeing none. Sir, if you can give us the staff findings or recommendations?
Certainly. So this is a project, 520 New Street. It's also known as the Palmer Tisdale House, built circa 1767 and remodeled in 1800, 1820, and to 1830. It is a contributing resource in the historic district. And the National Register inventory description from 2003 described it as 2.5 stories, 5 bays wide, gabled entrance porch, exterior and chimneys, hip roof, and gabled dormers. In the Sandbeck book, there's a description that was written in 1988, and I just excerpted a portion of that that could even be remotely related to a landscaping plan. However, I just wanted to add that he also reiterated the name as the Palmer Tisdale House, circa 1767 and remodeled circa 1800 and again 1820 to 1830. So he stated, in this, its earliest recognizable form, it had a gable roof, flush exterior sheathing, small pane 9/9 sash, a full basement, which is the only thing was remotely relevant, but you'll see maybe why in a second, and exterior end chimneys with single paved shoulders. The brick floored basement survives little change from this period, with 2 large rooms at each end, separated by a narrow brick partitioned storeroom. Both basement rooms have large cooking fireplaces with wooden lintels. Visible next to the east fireplace are the remains of the original bake oven, and it continues from there. I mention that because there are several windows to the basement, which is obviously more than just a utility room. So the landscape plan maybe should consider those windows. So 520 New Street, the project is to include a landscaping plan in the primary and secondary AVCs. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. For landscaping, 2.4.3 and 2.4.4. For parking, 2.7.2, 2.7.4, and 2.7.5. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is site work within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. The proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. The zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. And 4, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the commission approve this application to include a landscaping plan in the primary and secondary and tertiary AVCs, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you. Is there any evidence or testimony from any state, city, or government body that wish to present? Seeing none. Ma'am, do you have anything else you'd like to say at this time?
No, I have a larger landscape plan in case anybody in the commission wants to see it. It's hard to sometimes see on the screen, and it's also in color. So if anybody wanted to see it, I was going to make it available.
Does anybody? I think
I'm good.
didn't you have that at design review as well, I think?
Excuse me?
Did you show that to us at
I
design?
did, but, yeah, I did.
Yeah, we've seen it at design review. Okay. Okay, so, members, of the commission. Any questions, any statements you'd like to make at this point in time?
Just one quick comment, I went down.
Can you speak a little bit louder?
I'm sorry. I went down the list of plantings that are intended for this project, and I was really impressed with the fact that they are all reflective of what is in the historic district. Really fine choice of plants.
Well, good.
I agree.
Thank you. Okay, if no other questions then, I call for a motion to approve the COA.
Madam Chair, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 520 New Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines, based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Applicable guidelines, landscaping 2.4.3 and 2.4.4, and parking 2.7.2, 2.7.4, and 2.7.5. Findings of fact: 1, the project is site work within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. 2, the proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 3, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. 4, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Madam Chair, I second that motion.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any other questions at this time? Okay, if we can have a vote, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Can I have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, call for the vote. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the COA can be approved, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We thank you for what you're doing for the property.
You're gonna have to excuse yourself before, or then be on Zoom.
Okay, the next item, 206 Craven Street.
Madam Chair, I've got a conflict of interest. Our office has prepared part of the presentation for tonight.
Okay. So you're going to recuse yourself?
Need to recuse myself.
Okay. All of those, who would like to make a motion for him to recuse himself?
Madam Chair, I move that Commissioner Trippier be excused from this, on 206 Craven Street.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. So, sir, if you would give us an overview of the application.
Certainly. So this being the application for 206 Craven Street, the owners are H&W Land Holdings LLC, and Lee Heiner is one of those owners and is representing them this evening. Yes. And here we have a signature and date. This is the existing condition that they discovered when they pulled the plywood off of the outside of this doorway.
Oh.
And I believe it's also non-functioning, in that it's been shut, sealed shut. So they're looking to replace it with one similar to this one, which is also on the same building, on the same side, on the same alley, same kind of style. However, their proposal is instead of 2 doors, it'll be 1 door and a side light. It will include the transom though. So here's a drawing of that, shop drawing for that, and I'm going to use there's also been a drawing prepared to give you an elevation of the entire wait, there we go. Turned it off. There we go. So this drawing was sent to me, and I added it to the packet that's on my computer, actually down in this bag and not in the flash drive. So I apologize for that. So we'll do this way. This gives you, first on the left is, let me zoom in. An image down the alley. I know at design review we only had a street view shot that didn't quite get down the alley. So, and the doorway that we're talking about is this one right here. And then the other one is farther down. It's actually very hard to see in this photograph, it's so far down. And then this pair of drawings, let's just zoom out. This pair of drawings shows before and after. So up here is the before, showing the double doors. The other doorway is down the alley here. And then this is the after, in the same opening, but with the different arrangement of a single door and the side light and transoms, and metal and glass instead of wood. All right, I'll leave that there, and we can switch back and forth. And we'll go back to the rest of the application, which includes the zoning and inspections report at this point, where it meets the land use ordinance and will not require a building permit. You can go back to whatever image you'd like.
Okay. Are there any conflicts of interest on the board? Is there any issues with the completeness of the application among the members? Would the applicant like to present the project, sir?
I think Matt's done a pretty good job of giving the overview, and again, my purpose here tonight is to provide the context that was requested during design review to see the whole elevation, since it was obscured from the street in the photos.
Okay. Do we have any were you sworn in?
Good morning.
Good catch.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That was my job,
Yeah,
to remind you.
Good catch,
Tell the truth to the best of your knowledge.
I do. Thank you. Apologies.
Trying to sneak by us.
Well
Not gonna
done.
sneak.
Madam Chair, you caught me again.
I-
You'll have to identify yourself as well.
My name is Trip Ewer. I'm a principal with MBF Architects.
Okay. Are there any notified proponents to speak? Any notified opponents to speak? Seeing none of either one of those, there is not any rebuttal. Is there anyone with relevant evidence and has standing who would like to speak? Seeing none. Sir, if you would like to give us the findings of the staff and the recommendations.
Certainly. So this project at 206 Craven Street is a historic property by the name of New Bern Iron Works and Supply Company, built circa 1905 to 1908. It is a contributing structure in the historic district, and the inventory description from 2003 describes it as 2 stories, brick, 3 bays wide, segmental arched windows, and paneled frieze. The Sandbeck book also has a description, does have a description and describes it the same. However, their description in there has nothing relevant to this project. So the project itself, 206 Craven Street, is to include replacing an existing pair of doors with a new door along an alley on the Secondary AVC. The staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.2. Accessibility and life safety, 4.7.1, 4.7.2. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is an emergency egress doorway within the Secondary AVC. 2, the proposed design components and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. 3, the zoning administrator and the chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. and 4, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application replacing an existing pair of doors with a new door along an alley on the secondary AVC, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Okay. Is there any evidence of testimony from any state, city, or government official? Seeing none. Sir, is there any final comments that you would like to make?
No, thank you.
So, members of the commission, what questions do you have, statements to be made? I have one question, and that is, what is behind you putting a door and a light panel to replace the original 2 doors? Do you have a reason for doing that?
We do. The width of the existing masonry opening is not wide enough for us to get a 36-inch door to meet code for egress. So that pair of doors is about a 30-inch door leaf on each side, roughly. And so that's the reason why we're not replacing it with another pair.
Okay, that does answer my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want?
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we find the application for the certificate of appropriateness for 206 Craven Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15411 through 15429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact: windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.2, accessibility and life safety, 4.7.1, 4.7.2, findings of fact: the project is an emergency egress doorway within the secondary AVC. The proposed design, components, and materials meet the requirements of the guidelines. The zoning administrator and chief building official have reviewed this project and commented accordingly. The project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Second.
We have a second. Are there any other questions? Let us call for a vote. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Can I have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second.
All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None, so the COA will get passed.
Thank you very much for your
You're welcome.
consideration.
You're welcome. So do we have a motion to let our colleague back onto the podium?
So moved.
Madam Chair, I make a motion, we allow Mr.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none. Come and resume your seat, sir. Okay, so next is 704 East Front Street.
Okay, Madam Chair, this is actually our last project for the evening, believe it or not. And this is for 704 East Front Street. The proposal is to allow to elevate this house, including the rest of the changes that need to accommodate that. We have that application signed and dated. We have some drawings. And Ms. Afabak will be representing them, and she's done these drawings. So we have some photographs, first of the existing house, the front, from the direct head-on, and then from the left side, and then down the right side. I'm going to go down here first. This is the back, and again, of note, I guess, for all of these is the height above ground to begin with, and also the number of steps, stairs, and rails that are involved already. And so over here on the up, whoa, it's getting crazy. So on the upper right, the one image that was missing was the front steps. Okay. And the rear. So now we have here, oh yes, I said I was going to do a panorama, but I didn't. So this is a collage, or basically of various images streetscape. You can see the small house in the middle is theirs. The newly elevated one is on the right, the one that's on the corner of King and East Front Street. And then the somewhat larger building on the left. So a plan view existing. And then the new floor plan. So I guess the difference to note is primarily in plan view, you can see that on the left, on the bottom, we have a few more steps that have been added. And then on the right, the same number of steps again, but added in with an L to them. This is a very narrow lot, as you could tell by when we did the collage, there was very little space between houses on both sides of this house. So, and then this actually has the photograph on the left, of course, the subject house in the middle, and then the newly elevated house on the right. So you can see the space that's available in between the two, but also the change in scale between the two. So the proposal is to bring it up to the exact same height as the neighboring house. And also with the exact same foundation details, the lattice brickwork is on both. And this is the side elevation existing. And I'm going to have to go smaller. The side elevation new. So with this one, you can see the difference on the side, and you can also see that the site does drop off, at least noticeably. I wouldn't say significantly, but noticeably enough to where there are more steps needed on the back than on the front. This is a foundation plan. And then this is the elevation certificate. We usually do look at that, so I'm going to zoom in on that so we know what we're talking about. Although the fact that it's immediately adjacent to the previous one indicates appropriateness. So that's always on the second page. It indicates the actual elevation above sea level. So these numbers here, the 4.2, they call it the top of the bottom floor, but that includes the crawl space. So that's really the elevation of the crawl space, 4.2, the dirt under the house. The actual height of the floor is 8.2 feet above sea level. So there's 4 feet between the dirt and the floor surface. And then the other interesting ones are that the lowest adjacent grade next to the building, the lowest grade is 4.2, so that'd probably be out the back door or out the back foundation wall. And then the highest one, probably along the front foundation wall, is 5.7. So this is interesting because you subtract the 5.7 from the 8.2 and you get 2.5 feet. Is the current distance between the ground at the front of the house and the first floor. However, the new flood elevation will be required 11 feet. So this 8.2 feet has to go up another 3 feet approximately. So you end up with, instead of, 2.5 you're at now, 3 feet to that, it'll be 5.5 feet up front. I think I did all that math correctly in my head. So we'll go on to the next sheet.
So it is in fact going up to 11.
Yes. Oh, I guess it's the same elevation certificate twice. This this is the document authorizing Ms. Alphabach to represent them. This is the foundation drawing that we had before, showing that it is a brick veneer on the outside, and a tie strap detail. So, and then these were the photographs we had from the last time as well. So remember that even though this is only four risers here, there's a fifth riser back here at the actual entry door, which gives us the 2.5 feet. So this was also to demonstrate that the current house aligns perfectly with the front of the adjacent house. And close up of the foundation there. This is the foundation of the adjacent house with the lattice brick foundation. And you can see some more details on the back, and this was shot under the crawl space. Zoning and inspections review. It says that it meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, but shall not exceed 44 feet above mean sea level. So this particular area of the city has a special height requirement went along the river, whereby the very top of the house may not exceed 44 feet above sea level. This house is going to be more like 26 or 7 or 8 feet, so it's not even close. Oh, and then the building inspector said it will require a building permit. All right, and we're ready for our recommendations.
Okay. Are there any conflicts of interest with this application? Any issues with the application completeness? Does the applicant want to present anything?
Good evening, Sarah Appropriateness, Go Architectural Design. No, I don't want to add anything at this time, but I'll be here to answer questions.
Are there notified opponents? Seeing none. Are there notified proponents? Seeing none. So there won't be any rebuttal. Is there anyone with relevant evidence and standing? Seeing none. Sir, what do your staff say about this application?
I'm sorry, hold on. I just remembered that I forgot to include some information about the landscaping that they had provided.
So we can take out of that.
But I will get back to that. So, just roll all the way down. All right, so now this is for 704 East Front Street. Surprisingly, it doesn't show up in the National Register inventory, so we have no historic property name nor any reference as to whether or not it's contributing or non-contributing. There is no, so it's not applicable in this case. 704 East Front Street project to include elevating the existing house on a new brick lattice foundation, add new front steps and rear steps, and landscaping around the foundation. So staff submits the following historic district guidelines are appropriate to this application. Landscaping 2.4.3, foundations 4.1.1, 4.1.3, 4.1.4, entrances 4.4.1 to 4.4.4, masonry 5.1.1 to 5.1.6, wood 5.2.1 and 5.2.2, and paint 5.4.1 to 5.4.4, 5.4.6, and 5.4.9. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment R1. The project is located within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. Elevating the structure helps protect it from future damage and potential destruction or demolition. 3, the proposed modifications do not conceal, damage, or remove significant design components or architectural features. And 4, the project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve this application, elevating the existing house on a new brick lattice foundation, add new front steps and rear steps, and landscaping around the foundation, citing the aforementioned guidelines with the following condition. 1, a landscape plan shall be submitted, approved by the HPC, and installed before the house is occupied. In addition to other requirements, the landscaping shall effectively screen the foundation wall to mitigate its visual effect.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone with any evidence or testimony from the state, the city, or government body? Seeing none. Ma'am, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I just want to be clear, the entire foundation is not lattice. I mean, the front porch and the back porch are brick lattice with piers, but the main, portion of the house, the engineer suggested that it be a concrete masonry wall backed up with brick because of the structure of the house. And so it's not, and I believe that's what is drawn, is a simulated pier and right there, yeah, just regular brick. So but the front porch and rear porch would be lattice brick.
And that lattice brick is the same as the house to the right,
Correct.
so that they match
Yes.
up. Okay? Any members have any questions about that? Okay. I call for a motion.
Oh, wait, I have a question.
A question first?
Yes, Sarah,
Yeah.
you had a drawing of the house that was just recently raised to the right. How is it in comparison to the house on the left, height-wise?
The house, the fourplex on the left is, their front porch is at about 4 feet. And then I think they have another step up to the interior. So if you look, I've got one photograph of them all in a line, and you can see this house is so petite. I mean, it's so cute and little. So compared to the house next door, it's going to be about another 1.5 feet higher, the front porch, really. Because this house is being raised 4 feet above where it is now.
Uh-huh.
And so the house next door, its front porch is at about 4 feet, and this one is about 2, a little over 2. So now this front porch will be the opposite. It'll be a couple of feet higher than the house on the left.
But the overall height is,
Oh, the overall height. I don't know the overall height of the house next door. The overall height of this house is at about, to the eave, I've got it marked on there, it was about 17.5 feet. So the overall height's probably about 24, 25 feet.
and it won't give us a snaggletooth appearance with the height.
There's a
I think
picture.
it's snaggletooth
Right
right
there.
now. I think
But
this
that's
is
not
making
elevated.
it.
No, but if you elevate the house that we're talking about, it'll be somewhat
In
bring
line.
it up to the
Yeah,
house to the
'cause
left.
the house on the left right now is still below flood elevation. They have not raised it. So if it floods again like we had Florence, it'll flood again. But, the house on the right is at 12 feet. This middle house, we would like to be at 12 feet. So right now, the house on the left and this house, the front porch difference already is 2 foot difference. And now we're gonna raise it, and it'll still be 2 foot different, just in the opposite way.
Okay.
The
So-
house on the left is about to change hands like any minute, so we may see that one before too long anyway.
Okay.
Just for information's sake, when you raise a house, do you have to take everything out, like your appliances and everything?
No, actually, you really don't. We're gonna be raising one at 518 Craven Street next week, so you can come out and watch it.
Okay.
But it's a very easy process. They use hydraulic jacks, and they put steel in and support it, and they just jack it up. It's actually quite gentle, and you just have to disconnect all the utilities and plumbing and then reconnect it once it's done. But it's a very It's a fairly easy process, or should be.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions at this time?
I have one about the landscaping. Matt, did you say you had something about the landscaping?
Yes, I'll have to pull that one up.
But if something has already been submitted, should we take it off of the recommendations from staff?
I can say it's not a plan, first of all. It's a list. It's a drawing of the exterior of the house. They use the elevations that Ms. Auflerbach had drawn, and they sketched on that, just some green, colored in some green, and said, this is where we're going to have plants. And they suggested
Mountain laurel,
mountain laurel.
because we wanted to be an evergreen for the, for the season.
So it's not an official plan of any kind. So they're expecting to produce an actual plan.
So that would still come back.
Yes, so that could either come back to you, or you could decide to just let me check off that it's been submitted and it's appropriate. In terms of the types of plants and the level or degree to which it mitigates the height of the brick.
I would like to see that as a minor work, so whoever makes that motion, if they would say that, because, I don't think that should have to come back to us for approval.
No, as long as they comply with 2.4.3, then we're fine.
Madam Chair, I need to be excused. I have to.
Yes, sir, thank you. Thank you for your time. So do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 704 East Front Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Applicable guidelines: landscaping 2.4.3, foundations 4.1.1, 4.1.3, and 4.1.4, entrances 4.4.1 to 4.4.4, masonry 5.1.1 to 5.1.6, wood 5.2.1 and 5.2.2, paint 5.4.1 to 5.4.4, 5.4.6, and 5.4.9. Findings of fact: the project is located within the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. Elevating this structure helps protect it from future damage and potential destruction or demolition. The proposed modifications do not conceal, damage, or remove significant design components or architectural features. The project is not incongruous with the guidelines. I would like to attach the following condition. A landscape plan shall be submitted, approved by the HPC, and installed before the house is occupied. In addition to other requirements, the landscaping shall effectively screen the foundation wall to mitigate its visual effect.
Can I amend your condition to say that it will be approved by the staff as a minor work?
That's fine.
Landscape plan.
Second.
Okay, so we have a second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passed. Can I have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second?
Okay. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those who oppose? Hearing none, we can issue a COA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then you'll need to, when you do your landscaping, you'll need to get back in contact with Matt. Okay?
I'm not sworn in, but I was.
Good. Well, hold on. If you're gonna say something, you gotta be sworn in and speak up here. Okay? Tell us your
You
name.
swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge?
I do. I'm Mary Ann Koffenberger. The question that I have is with Joseph. You mentioned when the girl had the landscape, and you said the items that she had chosen to plant were really positive, and so.
At 520 noon.
Yeah.
So my question is do you have some suggestions? Because I was eager to hear what those kinds of things might be?
Well, I think there's a very wide latitude that people have in the plants that they choose. And what I would really recommend is just wander around the historic district and see what other people have planted.
It's in the ordinance. The land use ordinance actually has a plant list.
I know.
Oh.
Okay, okay. What'd you say, kinda? What did you say? Okay. Okay, all right, that's what I was asking.
I did notice that the city also chose Mountain Laurel in the project we reviewed today.
Oh,
They did choose it, or they?
okay.
They
So-
did.
But as I remember from Mr. Klotz's remark during the design review, it was in context to the fact that New Bern has a number of microclimates where certain plants will grow better than others. And so a place like along the Trent River
Well, this is,
may not be the same as over on the other side of town along the Neuse River.
yeah.
And so I think that's where Joe is just suggesting walk around that particular neighborhood and you'll see plants that are doing well and some that aren't doing so well, some that are taller and are thriving, and some that should be taller but are smaller for whatever reason.
Okay,
So that's all he's suggesting, I
Okay.
believe.
all right,
Correct?
thanks. Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I
thank
mean,
you all
that's
for
a
taking
west-
care of this house, we appreciate it.
That's a
Thank you very much.
west-facing elevation. It's gonna get a lot of afternoon sun.
I have a curiosity question, because you mentioned that the building is not on any historical register.
Yeah.
So how does a plaque show up? Because we have one on the porch
That's the
that says
Gaskin
Gaskin
store.
Store and has dates.
It means that it's been on a tour.
It's been on a home tour by the,
Been on a home tour.
by the, society.
Oh, okay, so,
So there could very well be other sources of information that have it and indicate it as having been a store. But it's just the National Register inventory doesn't have it,
Okay.
and the Sandbeck book didn't have it either. Those are our two primary sources.
It was in the library in a book.
yeah.
So I would love to know what that source is, because that sounds like it's a source that we could add.
Okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
thank you.
So this is the time for general public comments, and we have no general public left, so we will move on to the demolition by neglect committee report and update, if there is one.
James gave it last time and
That's what I'm saying, is there an
Yes,
update?
James is the chair.
Okay.
So, yes.
We haven't met since the.
Since the
design
update
review.
that we had, okay. All right. Is the guidelines update committee, do we have a report from them?
Well, I can certainly brief the board. Just to remind you, Ellen Sheridan and Jim Bisbee are my co-committee mates. I'm not sure we have a chair, but we met in my office, so I'm going to give the report. We met on June 8th, and I believe our next meeting, well, at the June 8th meeting, you have tonight under new business the product of that, which we'll certainly talk about later. I believe we're meeting again on maybe July 13th. We're going to meet about once a month. Essentially, what we've done is identified 3 opportunities for taking action, the first of which could possibly happen tonight with the work product that we recommend that you approve. There's some issues that require more discussion and thought. We're going to attempt to tackle those in the next, I'd say, 4 to 6 months maybe. We haven't quite detailed that schedule yet. And then lastly, I believe we all know a consultant will be working with us to talk about or to help us with floodproofing guideline language. And I kind of anticipate that work product not being ready for about another year. So as we were talking earlier before our meeting started, any changes we want to make ultimately have to go before the aldermen via the planning board through a process detailed by our ordinance. And so tonight I think what you've got are what we referred to as the low-hanging fruit last meeting, that items that were relatively easy to get some concurrence. And we'll be working in the coming months specifically on our own floodproofing guideline suggestions. so that we'll be prepared to share that with the consultant when the time comes, as well as a number of issues that staff has had a listing of. And one of the ideas we're floating is we've been very careful in how we've put together our guidelines to separate rules and procedures and things that need to be updated or amended from time to time from guidelines, which go through the alderman approval process. And so one of the things that we have not talked about yet, but are thinking about, is a number of staff's concerns we're thinking could be handled as either a rules and procedures for staff, or they could be integrated into our rules and procedures, under a chapter for staff. And either way, the intent being that we all appreciate the work Matt does for us, and he's very thorough, and he's come up with some suggestions that helps him do his job. And as always, we want to be as transparent as possible and to prepare any potential applicant for what kind of process they might have to undertake for what kind of work. And so all these things, if we can write them down, are beneficial, more useful, and help us be more consistent in our deliberations.
Thank you, sir. There is no old business, so new business is proposed changes to the guidelines, number A.
Matt, you want to lead us off?
Yep.
Matt, do you want my printed copy?
Yep, we got it right here. Okay.
Tame that technology.
Yeah, right. So the first item, first I guess to point out is that, at least on the screen and on your printed copies, the text in the italics is what is already in the guidelines. The bold is the suggested change, and then we also have some strike through for portions to be subtracted. So the bold is to be added, strike through, subtracted. So the first one is in section 1.4, where we're talking about the Historic Preservation Commission, and you can see in the beginning of the italics, it talks about we meet on the first and third Wednesday, etc. After it talks about public hearings are held for COA applications, then we're suggesting we add the applicant or representative of the applicant must be present to approve a COA. Strange enough that it wasn't already in there, but it is a requirement nevertheless, so we should at least include it in the guidelines. The reason I say it's a requirement is because that's a requirement for any quasi-judicial proceeding. So,
And I can elaborate just a little bit. The key word in our thinking is to approve a COA. We could have a hostile applicant who refuses not to appear, in which case we still need the ability to deny a COA if it's determined to be incongruous, so that it doesn't by default become approved by us not taking action after 180 days, I believe.
correct.
Yeah, so we're gonna take action to,
Yeah. So we could take action to disapprove the COA.
We can choose to table it, move forward, or we can choose to
Correct.
disapprove.
That's correct. So, we can go, we can decide if we want to, consensus, move forward with that one's okay, or I don't think we have to vote on each one in particular. We can vote at the end. If we come across one where we have some contention, then we can pull that aside at least for the moment. We can try and adjust it on the fly, and then get everyone's consensus approval of that, and then keep going. So those are a couple different scenarios of how to proceed, I suppose. I would suggest that we just change things on the fly if that's possible, if we don't really have that, set it to the side, and then come back after we say vote on all the ones that we do agree on. So I guess at this point, do we have any discussion on that? Any further discussion? Consensus is that that's good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So then section 1.6, obtaining a certificate of appropriateness. So we're talking about a list of minor works that can be approved by the HPC administrator, is maintained and updated by the HPC. The complete list is available on the City of New Bern website. It ends there and then lists the list. We're suggesting adding the HPC during a design review work session can direct the HPC administrator to process applications of limited scope as a minor work. So this provides the option for you all to do that, whereas up to now, it's pretty much you have to, if it's not on the list, it has to come here to the main meeting. I know on occasion it seems a little ridiculous, and you've sent it as minor work anyway, so now we're codifying that as an allowed process. Then we can talk about the next portion of that, the strike-through portion, in a minute. But do we all agree with that particular language? And feel free to feel like there needs to be a tweak in there somewhere, as long as it isn't changing shall to not or something, to shall not or something.
No, I think that's fine. We spent a little time really getting that sentence down so that it was clear that it was, when something came to design review, we all looked at it and went, Matt can handle that.
Right, and you
So that the commission understands what it is that they're referring now.
And the other thing to clarify here is that at the design review meeting, that's not an official meeting. So you can't make a decision. You couldn't decide that it is a minor work. You can only direct the HPC administrator to. So you're not making an official decision, there will be no vote. As long as you're comfortable with that.
So if we send it to you, then you can decide.
Right, right.
So we are making a decision to send it to you.
No,
Well,
We're not?
we're giving a directive about process. Is the way that I think about it.
Well, because Matt will bring something specifically to design review if he's uncertain whether or not it's.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Whatever language you want to use, we're sending it.
Yeah.
Right.
Matt.
Yes.
Okay.
And,
There won't be a vote.
and so to take this
If-
further, we've already delegated authority to Matt to make decisions on our
Yes.
behalf, as
Yes.
long as it's on the list.
Yes.
This is for the situation where it's again a minor work, and that's intentionally very general, because
Yeah.
it's something that's not on the list, and where we can direct Matt to, follow the minor work process.
Right.
And of course, obviously if Matt gets into it and he can't deny it
Right.
at
I'm not
all.
allowed to deny it.
And so if he gets into it and it either becomes more complicated than he's comfortable, or it's a situation where he's come to the conclusion that it's needs to be denied, it has to come back to a regular meeting
Right.
through our regular process like tonight.
So if you remember, we had the one where someone wanted to remove some modern shutters, right?
Yeah. And
It's not on the list,
Mm-hmm.
so it had to go all the way through the formal process,
Yeah.
just to do that. Whereas you could have at least, it's not on the list, so I would at least have to bring it to design review. And then at design review, you could have said, oh, look, you know.
Okay.
We
All right.
direct you to take
The way
this.
this is worded, does this still permit Matt to decide that something is a minor work and not bring it to design review?
I don't think so.
That's what I'm asking.
I don't think so. And
Only if it's on, if I feel it's on the list, so,
yeah, that's why our list is still necessary, because then there is no reason to come to design review
Right.
if it's on the list.
And the list does evolve, which is why we didn't want the list in paper and ink, because it's really more suited to the web, where it can be updated immediately.
right, so that does get to the strikeout piece. So, do we all feel comfortable with the bold part first?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And now the strikeout is to actually remove the list from the printed document. It ends up becoming only on the website.
Okay.
It's still in print, in text, but it's on the website.
Right.
And so, and I believe you have the ability to change that list without having to go through the entire text amendment process, similar to what all of these will have to go through in order to get changed, which involves the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then also the Alderman. There's advertising involved, which is a lead time for that. There's deadlines weeks ahead of the planning and zoning, so it's a 2 to 3 month process to change anything through the text amendment process. So, if you're ready, then we can talk about striking out that. Are we all comfortable with that?
Yes.
I do.
Then section 1.6, obtaining a certificate of appropriateness. So here, the text in italics is to remain and suggests we suggest removing supporting materials text in the strike-through from the guidelines and adding them to the COA instructions sheets. So the strike-through piece would be removed again from the printed document and is added into the actual, there's a 3-page instruction sheet that applicants can use to know what they should include in their application. Helps them to go through and answer all the questions appropriately, provide all the information they're supposed to need, and that's what this list was intended to do. Thing is, different projects have different needs. Removing shutters does not need a site plan with a north arrow. So the suggestion here is to remove those and put them elsewhere in that instruction sheet, which actually they already are. So,
I think that's fine.
everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we are. Move along.
We were doing so well with all the projects, right? All right, 1.9. So we have in the guidelines, in section 1.9, we have a worksheet for a COA evaluation. That's the worksheet with the green colored chart. And we suggest adding the text in bold. So first it says, this worksheet can be downloaded from the HPC website or it can be obtained from the HPC administrator. And then adding in bold, the green shading identifies guideline sections that are likely applicable to the type of proposed changes. That's currently not exactly obvious.
So that's just clarifying the process for our applicants.
Well, it's just clarifying what green means on the chart.
Okay.
So, I'll show you if it makes a difference. If you guys remember this one or not?
So,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
what you looking for, man?
So,
He's got one.
yeah, there you go. And Jim, if you want one. Oh, yeah, George has his open. So this one here, and it doesn't exactly say what the green means. So this would be adding what the green means.
Okay.
All right, so we're good with that?
Good.
All right. Next one is 2.3.1, add text as follows. After the italics, we want to add consolidate utilities in common locations. So after indicating we want utilities screened and such, we also are adding to consolidate utilities in common locations.
But would that be cases where that might not be possible because of the design of the house, existing issues, so forth? Should we put whenever possible?
Yeah, that's potential. Did we discuss that as an option? To add whenever possible?
We did,
Um,
you know, it's,
something that involves utilities and moving utilities and things like that is gonna show up. And if they're toing and froing and doing all that, chances are probably pretty good they have the opportunity to consolidate them. You know, if it's somebody's building an addition or doing, you know, if it's here, chances are probably pretty good they're doing a bunch of work anyway. So, you know, and if, this isn't like someone's gonna get, you know, lined up against a courthouse and shot if it doesn't get happen. It's a guideline, it's not the law.
Well, if the guideline says consolidated, and it doesn't have any qualifiers on it, then it means if you have your air conditioning on one side of the house and you have your phone line on the other side of the house, you're in violation.
yeah, and I don't have a problem adding that language, but from a more global perspective, I think many of our guidelines or standards have an implied when possible. You know,
And they're also not been applied that way.
Yeah.
I think that's a good catch.
It only gets sticky when you try and deny something, because people will get very particular about the actual specific language. So let's suppose someone was doing two mechanical units, one in the front corner of the house and one in the back corner of the house, 40 feet apart from each other, and for some reason that doesn't seem to be appropriate, and so we decided that they haven't consolidated them when they could have, or they should, and we want to deny it, but now we've said whenever possible. Now how do we, I guess that creates a greater burden on us to actually prove or show that it was indeed possible.
Well, it may be a good reason.
Right, and if there is a good reason, then that would make it more difficult for us to say, to deny it, right?
Well, I'd like the burden to be on us, in the sense that if we have a good reason for saying these two items
agree.
can be consolidated, then we should be able to say why.
Right.
And if we don't have a really good reason, then hopefully the applicant will prevail.
Is there a way that we can do it case by case?
We always do, yeah.
Well, but I mean, again, it's a guideline. You know, it's not legalese in that sense. It's not like a statute where, you know, you're gonna get written a ticket. It's a guideline.
Well, but potentially we can give them a ticket. We can say they're in violation of the guideline, and
Right.
that therefore they're gonna wind up getting fined.
Right. So,
Because like judicial.
and you should know, in about a year, the guidelines will become zoning standards. Not just, the state has mandated that we will change the name from guidelines to standards.
One more little change for us to take care of in about a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
Why?
That's so ambiguous. I mean, utilities, I mean, that could mean
A
the
lot.
plumbing, you know,
The gas
we're putting, you
meter
know,
on one
on the
side of the house.
electrical meter on the outside of the house, or, I mean, I would be very careful with that, and if you have a chair that is very, a rule follower, they're gonna make you put everything together, where a lot of times that's not, it's not reasonable. You might have a water heater on the outside of the house on one side, and the air conditioning unit on the other side. Just,
Yeah,
you know, this board changes a lot, and if you
yeah,
have someone who only likes to follow the rules, then it,
literally.
Well, but if they can give justification, just like I asked you, tell me why you're not putting two doors back there.
Right.
And you gave justification why that wasn't possible. So if the applicant can justify why that's not possible,
that does not allow for justification.
no, that does allow for justification, just like a lot of this does. But that's the intent, is that it all be consolidated. If it can't be consolidated, then you have to explain to us why it cannot. Just like the preference would be for us to have two doors on this building, because that's how it originally was. But if that's not possible, then we need to look at the next alternative that we have.
Maybe the better word is whenever practical.
I think we need to modify.
I think when you put any of those things in there, we're just giving all this leeway for all this stuff to happen.
I leave it as is.
I would say leave it as it is, and we'll see what discussion we need to have, just like I had the discussion with him today.
An example to me, I guess we have a guideline that says you can't have an attached garage. And someone wanted one, and it was voted down because it was a rule, not a
Right.
guideline.
Right.
And I think we need to be careful that we're not too rule-based.
Well, this is
Take
kind
on
of
the
kind of standard,
like to think of it.
I'm an easy target.
In that application where you're putting in a single door with a side light, it's not impossible to put in a double door, just open it up further, take out some more brick.
That's right.
So, is it possible? It's possible, almost anything is possible, but does it make sense?
Right, that's the practical.
And how do you determine what makes sense? There has to be opportunity for us to disagree with applicants and for them to disagree with us. The burden of proof becomes one of being persuasive in your argument. And I think that's the room that we're looking for. I think people should be encouraged to be persuasive in their argument. But if someone comes in and says, well, yeah, my electrical is on this side, and my gas is on that side, because I think it looks better. Well, that's not persuasive.
But it'll be a cost issue, and you guys won't like that, or you won't consider that
Cost.
cost. You
No.
know, cost is cost, you gotta
Well,
move
it
it.
says we can't, right?
So.
So if they would read the guidelines, they perhaps wouldn't get into a cost issue.
Well,
She's suggesting that if they had read the guidelines before they decided where to put it, they may have consolidated it before they got too far into where it will cost more. But
Right.
the thing what she's saying is that even when you plan ahead, putting things, say, two bathrooms, this is in the inside the house, far apart, costs more than putting them back to back. So similarly with utilities, that might be the case. But in some cases, the gas line is coming in off of this street, and the water line is coming in off of this street. So you have two totally different situations that can't be consolidated. Well, they can be consolidated with a lot of money,
That's right. They can be.
which you guys aren't allowed to, or supposed to concern yourself with. So, but you could concern yourself with what's possible or practical or maybe sensible, or you could say that it's recommended or encouraged or something of that nature.
Oh, there you
could
go.
that way as well.
Well,
and at least put some thought in people's mind if they're looking at it ahead of time. Oh, yeah.
You know, I believe the idea behind the change is to encourage it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to address the concern.
We encourage.
All right, I'm gonna rewrite.
Consolidate utility.
No, it is recommended that utilities be consolidated so then there is some leeway there
Yeah, we gotta.
in a
yeah, we
common
gotta leave some
location.
wiggle room, because I'm sitting here thinking about houses up and down the street, and it's not uncommon to have large stuff, your HVAC units, in the back of the house, and then maybe the smaller stuff, the cable TV box, the phone box, somewhere else where it's,
That's what you consider a utility, and it could be something really tiny.
Okay.
yeah.
All right, Matt, you want to hear that one more time?
So I'm suggesting that
It is recommended that utilities be consolidated in a common location.
Yes, okay. All right. Good. Thank you. So- Good change. All right. We're all good with that? Yeah.
Yes?
All right, yeah, sorry, I should have asked that first. 2.3.4,
Future tense issue.
add text as follows. I don't know why that's underlined there, but, so we have the existing text, talking about evaluating all these utilities and equipment that are in the public right-of-way, utility poles, streetlights, railroad crossing signals, etc., that they be evaluated for their visual impact on the street, and then adding install multiple utilities on common poles. So this is probably more related to the 5G kind of stuff that we've been starting to see, and specifically in the historic district. We've been lucky, I think, so far. We've had people that have been suggesting from the get-go that they put all their equipment on the pole, but that wouldn't necessarily be the case in the future. So this is another addition that's suggested to handle kind of those situations.
Again, the way it's written, I'm very comfortable with it because in some cases, if you mount too much equipment on one pole, then visual impact is terrible. So it needs to be separated out, but this allows for that, the way it's written. So yes, it encourages combining as much as possible rather than putting up more poles. Okay. But in some cases, and I can't imagine off the top of my head what that would be, but in some cases, mounting too much on one pole would just be an eyesore.
And that could be driven by location, you know, the pole relative to some other concern that takes priority.
We just dealt with that
On Front,
on
South
Front Street.
Right across, right at the Shriners Temple, or the Shriners
Right.
building.
Right.
That's, those, and I guess we're gonna have more and more of these little 5G
And the other one, the
guys coming.
5G one that we did last fall was the one down, that's
By the
now been
convention center.
installed on Middle Street, down by the
Hotel.
hotel.
Yeah.
Matt,
About
is any
Craven Street,
consideration
I think.
been given to 5G poles being placed in neighborhoods? Or are they all in industrial areas or whatever?
I don't know.
I'm
I
thinking
think
of a case out west where they had the 5G at a school, and they had 2 children that came down with brain cancer, and then the school wound up being sued, and they had to move the pole away from the school. So I just wondered if it was if the poles were going to be, if we're going to consider anything about poles being put in neighborhoods.
Yeah, I don't know, that's a zoning question that I don't know
Yeah.
about. If we were in Elizabeth City, I could answer that. All right, so, I guess we're good with 2.3.4. 4.1 is mixed in. So instead of maintain mature street trees, it'll be maintain mature canopy trees. None of the other guidelines actually speak to the trees that are on private property, but we do control that with tree removal permits and things like that. So this was to fix that. Then adding mature tree removal and its replacement species must be recommended by a certified arborist. And then replace, instead of distressed trees, but remove trees with a similar canopy species at or near the location of the removed tree, and locate canopy trees to define the street edges. That would, of course, be for ones that are along the street.
The only problem I have with that one is if it's a mature tree that was there when you moved and it was there for years and years and years, but it's not appropriate for where it is, does the arborist then decide that it's okay to put something else in
Yeah,
there?
it depends what you mean by appropriate.
Okay,
Because
good.
an arborist will look at it in terms of appropriateness for the health of the tree and the safety of the
House,
the people
whatever.
and the house and the
Yeah.
property around it.
And I noticed that Parks and Rec, when they're replacing trees, you know, they're saying you really shouldn't have a big old oak tree here, and they're,
Yes, so there have been mistakes in the past. And, you know, all kinds, you know, private and public. And so over the years, you know, we've had to deal with a lot of those problems, as maybe each one of you have on your own properties.
Yep.
Yeah, so there will be, that's another reason why we're using an arborist to help make the decision.
But the other part of that is, as Matthew stated, we're talking about the well-being of the tree. If we're talking about a healthy tree that happens to be on that planting strip, like the one that was in front of my house, it was completely healthy. The city decided to take it down because they didn't want it there. It was just that simple. Well, they did. They took it down. Well, this says no. I mean, if we're dealing with a healthy tree, it may have been a species that once upon a time was appropriate, but now, based on how sewer and water is constructed, it isn't. Well, tough. It's a healthy tree. Leave it alone. You know, if it becomes diseased, if it threatens property, that's a whole different story. And then we have to go back, as this is, with an equivalent canopy tree. Because what the city was doing for a while was they were planting crepe myrtles all over the place, which are not canopy trees.
No, they're not.
So, in addition to what this change is here, so we say, in this change, we say replace removed trees with a similar canopy species at or near the location of the removed tree. We ask the arborist to provide us with that species. So the arborist, being the expert, would be able to identify that in this very tight, small space, you can't plant, or you shouldn't plant a pecan tree, for example. But you might plant, I don't know, something, let's just say, something much smaller, a ginkgo tree or something. I mean, that's not the right example, but a different tree that is appropriate for that space. Which may also have to do with the amount of pavement that's around it, or the amount of actual lawn and such that's around it. May have to do with the amount of light that's available, because there are other large trees around. Those kinds of factors are important when you're deciding what species is appropriate, or perhaps the microclimate, right? So we're relying on them to provide that species.
is there a guideline, Matt, for what size of the tree what size of it?
Yes, so it's a similar canopy.
So the
No, I mean,
arborist,
the plant that you put in the ground.
So in our conditions, we just say it has to at least be 2-inch caliber tree. So, at breast height. So it just has, it can't be a whip or anything like that. It has to actually be a tree with a trunk.
Right.
So you start with at least that. But of course, those trees hopefully are gonna last 30, 50 years, and will get much larger. So, but that's all, and the important thing being that we choose, or a species is chosen which will provide a similar canopy as the one that was removed. Because we're looking to make sure that we maintain that canopy over the centuries rather than gradually diminishing them and putting in, let's just say a whole bunch of crepe myrtles for the rest of forever. And that would not be, your historic district would not be the same. And as a result, we are getting a variety of trees, which is also another good thing, diversity in plantings.
Well, the other part, which oftentimes isn't considered, again, using my house as an example, when the condo that was in front of my house was taken down, I had azaleas that were in front of my house that were 50 years old and they all died. But suddenly they were exposed to direct sun and they just can't tolerate that.
All right.
So I lost all these mature plantings in front of the house.
Because a shade tree had been removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what I put back is going to eventually provide shade, but,
Right.
it won't be for another 15 years or so.
Right. So, okay, so are we okay with this?
Yes.
With these revisions here? Do we want to change it in any way?
No, I like this.
Okay. Next, 2.7.2, use driveways to access off-street parking areas located in the tertiary AVC. Areas for vehicular use shall not exceed more than 50% of the rear yard, and we had period. So we're adding in the tight weave development pattern, because we realized we really didn't expect that in the downtown area, but rather in the residential area. So that's referred to in the guidelines as the tight weave development pattern.
And Matt, you can't park 4 cars in front of your house, huh?
It doesn't say that.
No, the reason I'm asking, because there's a house down on Broad Street,
Yeah.
and initially it had a driveway, you could go to the back, and now it's got 4 cars parked in front of the house in what once was a yard, and now it's gravel, so.
Okay.
But that's not historic district, is it? It's
Where?
before you get to where you turn off on Noose Boulevard,
Oh, yeah, so the historic district ends well, there's, the coffee shop.
Bern
Yeah,
Street,
Five
And-
Points.
Yeah, Bern Street, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that little building next to it that was just remodeled. That's not in the historic district. But everything on this side from there on is in the historic district. So if you're talking about somewhere,
down across
Farther.
from the Dollar General.
oh, yeah.
That's not
That's
historic.
out.
That's a shame.
Yeah. So, okay.
See.
I don't know if this can even be addressed or is addressed within that, but I'll raise it anyhow. On my street, Pollock Street, the 200 block of Pollock Street, next door to me there's a bed and breakfast, I'm a bed and breakfast, right across the street there's a bed and breakfast. There's the Meadows Inn, which is a bed and breakfast, and there used to be another one, which is no longer a bed and breakfast. And with the exception of my house, none of them have backyards, because we can't park on the street. So everything is forced into the backyard, eliminating, my attitude, going down to Charleston, one of the most amazing things about a lot of those historic buildings is the backyard. They have these magnificent gardens, and at least in this town, we've been deprived of the right to have that. I have it because I have a long enough driveway, because my property is 170 feet deep, so I can park the cars nose to nose. But, I don't want to park them in the backyard. And I don't want a guideline or an ordinance that forces me to dig up the backyard to put cars in there. I think that would be criminal.
Well, this doesn't do that.
That's
Well,
what I'm saying.
in that case, can we move on?
Well, but it talks about parking.
But it says no more than 50%. So it's preserving yard. It's doing what you asked.
Well, not in a tight read situation, because by the time you run your driveway back there, even though you're only 50%, well, anyhow.
But, I mean, it could be argued that cars all over the street are less historically appropriate than
Well,
cars
they
in
won't
the
have to go back
tertiary.
to horses and buggies.
Right, so,
So, Joe, are you okay with this?
I'm okay with the way it's written, I'm just,
Okay.
you know, it raises a question to me about this whole parking thing.
Hmm.
Because the downtown, while it's treated separately, has a lot of, quote, historical houses, not just commercial buildings.
Okay.
And
So, let me suggest then that if there's one or more of the guidelines that you might want to add or tweak, then go ahead and send them to me, and I'll send them to the committee, and we'll look at that as an update.
yeah, I just wasn't sure if the
Yeah.
issue of parking should be considered by HBC or whether that's something for planning and zoning.
Well, we can start with the committee, and that
Yeah.
would be a good way.
Certainly think about it,
Yeah.
see if we can't come up with some
Yeah,
solutions.
yeah. Especially if you kind of outline what you think the issue is. All right. And it may turn out to be a zoning thing in the end anyway. So, okay, we're all good with that then?
Mhm.
2.7.2, 2.9.1, construct piers with wood decking or concrete panels. And then the remaining is the other about being narrow and perpendicular parallel remains. So we're just adding the option of concrete panels.
It's good.
Any comments?
Just one, how, is there a guideline on how far out in the perpendicular a deck can,
No, and I suppose it's,
that's
yes,
CAMA.
CAMA. The, the navigable waterways, the property lines, all that kind of stuff, start to play a role, but from,
okay. So
That's
that's
beyond
FEMA
our
property.
pay grade.
right, yeah.
In fact, CAMA determines much more about how those facilities are built than we do, believe it or not. It's all related to depth of water and number of vessels and fire protection, and it goes on and on.
So it's not just based on keel?
All right, any other questions, comments on that one? We good with that? No, most of you had commented during the one design review that you felt like it was appropriate for them, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
it's fine.
language okay for that?
Yes.
All right. Good. Sound good to you?
You can leave now.
4.2.4.
Don't leave now, we're not finished.
Yeah. We could use your. So incorporate wood trims and articulate masonry appropriate for the application. The strike through is there, but it's actually moved down to create a new guideline in the next line. So you'll see it's the exact same language. We just created a second guideline out of that. That allows us to cite one and not the other, and vice versa, not the other, but the first or the second. Not the first, but the second. So, which is something I've had a little bit of difficulty with over, in some cases, where I'd like to cite one portion of a guideline, but not the rest. It's more the case in longer ones than it is with shorter ones. But so, it seems these two things are slightly different topics, so that also implies that maybe they should be separate guidelines. You guys good with both of those?
Yes.
Yeah.
4 and 5. All right. 4.3.5, modify the text to be as follows. This is regarding windows. Tinted, currently it just says tinted glazing is not appropriate in historic windows. Now we're adding tinting opaque and reflective glazing is not appropriate. So glazing being the glass, so sometimes glass is made opaque, and sometimes it's made like mirrors. So, I don't know, have we had an application like that before? Or we're just anticipating that could happen?
You've got glass mirrors in the dry cleaners. I mean, mirrored glass in the dry cleaners is a relatively new installation.
No, they're outside the historic district, though.
I don't
This
think
is
so.
one on
They're
Pollock
corner of
Street?
Pollock and Hancock.
Yeah, it's one of Pollock Street.
Pollock and Hancock.
Interesting.
Church.
So,
But because it wasn't
Not a
prohibited.
structure.
well, yeah, I'm not sure how it got there.
So the way this is
But it just struck me as my office used to look out the window at the building. That's probably not an appropriate application, because that's different than tinting.
Right.
I mean, or I could see that being a difficult, unnecessarily difficult conversation, because it's different than tinting.
So the way this is written, it applies to the historic windows, so you could put opaque or reflective glass in a new building.
So for an infill, you're talking about
Yeah.
infill construction?
Yeah, conceivably, George, I think that would be one interpretation.
But
So-
maybe I ought to leave it that way.
Well, and, I mean, we always say new buildings need to reflect their time.
And so we kind of talked a little bit about whether historic needed to be in front of windows, or just whether it should be windows or not, but chose to leave it like it is.
Yeah. So it would only apply to historic windows.
Yes.
Now, notice also, there's also something we discussed was that we did not put in those like, well, first of all, leaded glass or stained glass
Translucent.
or translucent, or the ones that are like stamped with the pattern in it, you know, that people use for like bathroom windows and things. So, those would still be allowed, all of those.
Good.
Okay, we all good with that? All right. 4.4.4, provide running porches, entrance doors, removing porch to just all railings, and other ornaments that proportionately relate to the building. So 4.4.4 is, what's the category? Entrances.
Entrances.
Right, so we're talking about entrances. Provide porches, entrance doors, railings, and other ornaments that proportionately relate to the building. Appropriate balustrades often convey a heavier visual appearance. And then adding the sentence that we've always had in the paragraph ahead of the guidelines, and have asked people to conform to, but adding that finally into the actual guidelines. Center balusters between the top and bottom rails and space them about 3 inches across.
And we're going to work on the comment you shared last time, Joe, about your discomfort with about. Because we have a couple of other guidelines currently that use that same language at the tail end. So we're talking about that more to see if we can dial it in some.
Does that mean you're gonna take about out?
Well, we haven't
You kind of can't.
decided. We pushed it down the road to phase 2 of our deliberations.
You
So
kind
what
of,
does about mean? Does that mean it could be 3.5?
well, it depends on the baluster, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, and it depends on where the 3 inches is, because you have some balusters that are fat in the middle and skinny at the bottom because they do that, and, you know, there are all kinds of different ways of constructing a railing, and so the about sort of kind of needs to be there. That was a pun that was sort of intended. Anyway, the about has to be there because things aren't that cut and dried, again, if you'll excuse the pun. But they're not. You know, if you have a historic baluster, they can be really ornamental and burned all over the place.
So a house on East Front Street might have a very grand entry where the rail is maybe 8 inches wide, and the balusters are maybe 4 inches, across. And then we might have
And to put them 3 inches apart, you might make them too close together.
Visually really heavy.
Yeah, and then we might have a house that is much less ornate and much smaller in scale and mass, where they're, the rails closer to the 4 or 4.5 inches. We see more often with maybe the 2-inch balusters, and the about helps us navigate those two conditions, to give some flexibility to.
Keeps things from being 5 or 6 inches apart.
But it needs to be visually pleasing no matter what.
And usually you can't make that determination until you see it drawn. A sample of it that kind of gives some visual weight to all the pieces.
That happened to the house across from me. Someone had gone in and remodeled it and cut the porch down to about this big. And then the guy who bought it wanted to take it back to the historic look. He had a picture, and it had that balustrade in it. And whereas before the pickets were like that, then they had to go like that because of the pattern. But it's beautiful.
And it's certainly not intended that this is measured on center. This would be the space between them. Yeah.
Well, that just complicates things even more.
Yeah.
So it's about.
Yeah. Are we good with that the way it is, or?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. 5.3.4. Totally new. This is in the section metals. So we're adding a new guideline. Provide aluminum fabrications with welded joints or blind mechanical connections having concealed fasteners. So we've recently had, at least that I know of, several fencing proposals where we've approved aluminum, but we've been making sure that they've been kind of these concealed fasteners. Trip indicates that you can actually weld aluminum as well, although most people won't.
So you can't see any screw heads and so forth.
Exactly.
Correct.
Well, in Philip City, you,
What's that?
all the fencing around Union Point, you can see the screw heads.
Oh. Well, that's why we need this. So,
This is proactive, not retroactive.
yeah.
Right.
Anything else?
No?
We
I
good?
agree. I
All
like
right. 5.4.4. Modify the text as follows. Consider using opaque stain in lieu of paint on flooring, fencing, and similar wood surfaces exposed to foot traffic or weather. So this would include balcony flooring or deck flooring. Well, so we got rid of deck flooring. We have both porch and deck flooring covered, but also balcony flooring, other flooring, I don't know what you might think of. And then also now we're adding fencing and weather.
I think that's just a wise statement.
You good?
Yeah, that actually is just don't forget about that option.
And we're using consider.
And you are saying consider, you're not saying, okay.
If someone wants painting,
Someone needs something.
Bless their heart.
Now, that does though potentially leave it open to untreated wood.
Isn't there another guideline somewhere?
I think we have a paint guideline that has to be painted.
There is.
All of it has to be primed and painted, or exposed
stop. We're gonna stop there and not go to proposed changes to the minor works list?
We did that. I'm sorry. Well, first we want to take care of this as its own separate item. So, as far as my records indicate, we have consented to all of the changes as written except for 2.3.1. We'll add or change it to, it is recommended that utilities be consolidated in common locations.
Right. Okay. So the next item, proposed changes to
Wait,
the
so
minor
we
works
need-
list, we're not gonna do that now?
Well, you'll need to vote to adopt this,
Oh, okay, we need to vote about that first, okay.
and then this will get passed on. It's interesting to me that the terminology seems to be to adopt it, even though it doesn't become official until the aldermen actually approve it, but,
So all in favor of the changes that we have just been
we
through?
need a motion and a second.
I move we adopt these changes.
I second.
Okay. So all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, hearing none, it is adopted.
Okay, cool. All right. So the next item
Minor works
is
list.
a particular change to the list of minors. We wanted to add a sentence about it being, let's see, how do we want to do it? Trip, do you remember which one that was that we were
Well,
just thinking of?
I think it was the one that had something to do with docks and piers, was it not?
Oh, right, that's right, exactly. So currently the minor work items list that's on the website says, quote, waterfront docks without lifts for boathouses. So, we suggest we just change it to waterfront docks. Without boathouses is already not allowed. So, lifts have been allowed in the past. So we have a track record of allowing them. And so the issue about boathouses and gazebos and things like that was that they were structures that were, considerable structures that would block the view either from or to the river. Whereas lifts are mechanical devices that basically come up to the, come up out of the water. So, now the boats do then get lifted up higher than, they get lifted out of the water in the process, so they're up higher than they otherwise would be. But, like I said, we have
lifts
a
are
lot-
also really temporary.
We have, sometimes they'll be, up more than they're down.
No, I mean, the actual lift itself just,
The lift
Store-
itself, right?
yeah, they come, they go,
Right. But
They
with the
fail.
boat in it. Mhm. So we're suggesting that we just change it to waterfront docks as an item that can be reviewed as a minor work.
Okay.
And then you guys, aren't interested in the particulars of that aside from what's already in the guidelines. Good?
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I move that we amend our minor works list accordingly.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed, hearing none, the motion passes.
All right. Next. What's on our agenda next?
The next on our agenda is your report on the COAs which were issued, and we have a list of those and the minors. And then item B there is other items and updates.
Trying to think of anything. No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else they want to share or talk about at this point?
Actually, I have something nice that people should stroll by and see.
Okay.
And Tripp can chime in on this, which is the Preservation Foundation and the King Solomon Lodge just received their matching grant from the Stedman Foundation. And so work is progressing apace on the King Solomon
Well,
Lodge,
thank goodness.
which is really
Finally.
wonderful. So the
Yeah.
windows are going to be swapped out, and if you recall, this all started with us when they came to change the windows, and we
Right.
trooped over there and looked at the lodge and went, wait a minute,
Right.
this is incredible. So
that
we
is
should feel
wonderful.
really good about that as a commission.
Yeah, that's really great. Great.
So,
Okay, if no other items, do I have a motion for us to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Hearing none? We are adjourned.